It all started with a letter, an innocent-looking envelope that, at first glance, seemed like just another piece of neighborhood paperwork. But when Tom Williams opened it, his world turned upside down. Failure to comply with HOA regulations, it read. A fine of $500 for non-compliant lawn decorations. It was just the beginning. He'd always kept to himself, enjoying the quiet life he had built for over 30 years. But now, a small group of strangers had decided to take that away from him. The next letter, the next fine, and the next demand, each more ridiculous than the last. Soon, it wasn't just about his lawn or his garden gnome. It was about something far more sinister. His right to live freely in his own home. What Tom didn't know yet was that this small battle would lead him to uncover a secret so big, so powerful, it could change the fate of the entire neighborhood. And when Tom found that secret, the game was on. Tom Williams, a retired teacher in his early 60s, was living what he thought was the quiet, peaceful life he had earned. The little house he'd bought on the edge of Silver Pine Estates had been his pride and joy. Every day, he'd sit on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over his neatly manicured lawn, thinking about the thousands of students he had taught over the years. He never imagined that something as simple as a lawn and a mailbox could one day become a battlefield. Yet this all changed the day Evelyn, the new president of the HOA, came into his life. Evelyn was a woman on a mission, and that mission was control. For months, she had been issuing fines to the residents for everything. Lawn overgrowth, unapproved colors for mailboxes, the angle of garden gnomes. To Tom, this all seemed ridiculous. But what hit hardest was when Evelyn herself showed up at his door with a notice for a fine. $500 for non-compliant lawn decoration. It wasn't about the money. It was about his right to live freely in his own home. The confrontation with Evelyn marked the beginning of something much bigger than a petty neighborhood squabble. It was the beginning of Tom's fight for independence. At first, Tom tried to reason with Evelyn. He politely explained that he wasn't aware of these new rules and certainly didn't recall signing anything giving her the right to impose them. Evelyn's response was cold and dismissive. "We all have to follow the rules, Tom. It's for the greater good of the community," she said, her tone dripping with authority. But that moment didn't just sting, it ignited a fire in Tom. He needed to understand exactly what he was up against. That night, as he sifted through the legal paperwork for his house, Tom stumbled across a detail he had never noticed before. His deed. Hidden in the fine print was a clause that made his house different from the others in the neighborhood. Tom owned the road that led into Silver Pine Estates. This revelation stunned him. For all these years, the HOA had been using the road for free, with no legal claim. His mind raced. The HOA had been acting as though they had authority over everything, but now, with this discovery, Tom knew he had something far more powerful than they realized. The road wasn't just a path to his house, it was his ticket to taking back control. Tom could hardly believe it. He owned the road, the very one the HOA had used for decades, collecting dues from every resident without paying him a cent. His hands shook as he looked at the deed, the words private property, jumping out at him like a beacon. He had known the road was part of his property when he bought the house, but he never thought much of it. Now, it felt like a secret weapon in his hands. He wasn't just a homeowner. He was the literal gatekeeper of the community. No one had ever questioned the road's ownership, least of all the HOA. They had assumed they could use it without consequence, and Tom had let them. But that was before Evelyn's fines. Before she tried to turn his peaceful life into a nightmare. Now, with this newfound power, Tom realized it was time to turn the tables. The road wasn't just a way to get into the neighborhood. It was the key to exposing the HOA's overreach and giving him the leverage he needed. With this one document, Tom had a foundation for a fight that could change everything. Tom wasn't just going to take the HOA's nonsense lying down. If Evelyn wanted a fight, he would give her one. But it wouldn't be just any fight, it would be a bold stand. He remembered his late uncle's stories about the toll booth he'd built on his private property years ago, a small but powerful act of defiance against a local government that had overstepped its bounds. Inspired by the memory, Tom began making plans to build his own toll booth. He'd take control of the situation, literally and figuratively, by turning the very road Evelyn tried to use against him into a symbol of his defiance. But he couldn't do it alone. He reached out to his old friend, Sam, a retired contractor with years of experience in building everything from fences to toll booths. Sam didn't even hesitate before offering his help. Together, they gathered old materials, designed the booth, and figured out how to install it without violating any local laws. The plan was simple but powerful. Every car that passed through the neighborhood would pay a toll. Not just any toll, though a special one for HOA members. Tom was going to make sure Evelyn felt the weight of her actions in the only language she understood: money. The booth wouldn't just be a financial burden for the HOA. It would be a statement that would echo through the neighborhood. The day of installation arrived. Tom stood on his property, surveying the space where the toll booth would soon stand. He had never been one to seek conflict, but now, with every concrete footer and bolt, he felt a surge of pride. It was a simple act, but it carried immense weight. As Tom and Sam set the booth up, neighbors watched from their windows. Some were curious, others skeptical, but none could deny that something was changing. The first car to roll up was Margaret, his retired neighbor who had always been quiet but kind. She stopped, smiled, and handed Tom the toll. "It's cheaper than Evelyn would charge for a fence being an inch too high," she joked. That simple moment marked the beginning of something even bigger. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood, and before long, Tom had a line of cars waiting to pass through his toll booth. Evelyn's wrath was no longer the only thing on everyone's mind. People began to rally behind Tom. His toll booth wasn't just about collecting money. It was about collecting the power to fight back against a system that had been taking advantage of people for far too long. Evelyn wasn't just upset, she was furious. She marched down the street to Tom's house with a look of pure rage on her face. "You can't do this," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger. Tom, standing calmly by the booth, simply pointed to the deed in his hand. "Actually, I can," he said, his voice steady and firm. Evelyn's eyes widened as she realized the truth. Tom had every right to charge a toll on the road. For the first time in months, she was at a loss for words. Her frustration grew as she realized that she couldn't just bully Tom into submission. He wasn't intimidated by her threats or her power. He was standing firm, and the community was starting to take notice. As she turned to leave, defeated, Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. This wasn't just about a toll booth. It was about taking a stand for his home, his rights, and his peace. And it was only just beginning. Evelyn wasn't about to let Tom's victory slide. She retaliated with legal threats, sending Tom letters full of technical jargon and trying to use her influence to have the toll booth removed. But Tom wasn't about to back down. He had lived through years of bureaucracy in his role as a teacher, and now he was using all his knowledge of systems to outmaneuver Evelyn. Each letter she sent him was met with a calm, well-thought-out response. He consulted lawyers, reached out to city officials, and began documenting every communication. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had ever felt powerless under the thumb of a ruthless HOA. The battle became a test of patience and wit. Evelyn tried to escalate things, but with every move she made, Tom had a counter. He wasn't just fighting back, he was winning one legal victory at a time. As the months went on, more and more residents began to rally behind Tom. People who had never spoken out before now joined his cause. Margaret, the retired nurse, became his most vocal supporter, and soon others followed. They began to see the toll booth not just as a nuisance, but as a symbol of resistance against the oppressive rules Evelyn had imposed on them. Tom's struggle had awakened something in them, a sense of solidarity and community. They started to share stories of their own frustrations with the HOA. Fines for garden flags, complaints about the placement of flower pots, even warnings for children drawing chalk on sidewalks. The floodgates opened, and before long, Tom wasn't just fighting alone. The entire neighborhood was behind him, and Evelyn's power was slipping away. The alliance between Tom and his neighbors was a reminder that sometimes all it takes to create change is a small group of people who are willing to stand up and speak out. As the fight raged on, Tom began to feel the emotional toll. He had always been a man of reason, someone who solved problems with calm and logic. But now, as the HOA's attacks grew more personal and their tactics more underhanded, he began to question whether it was all worth it. Was he becoming too fixated on the fight? Was this about justice, or was it just about winning? But every time he felt like giving up, he remembered the look on Evelyn's face when she realized he wasn't going to back down. He remembered the way his neighbors rallied behind him, their support unwavering, and he knew that the stakes weren't just personal. They were about something much bigger. It wasn't just about a toll booth or a neighborhood dispute. It was about taking back control from those who thought they could push people around. Tom's emotional journey was one of resilience, and in the end, it proved that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit can endure. In the end, Tom's victory wasn't just legal, it was emotional and communal. The HOA was dissolved, Evelyn was ousted, and Tom reclaimed his road. But what really mattered was the legacy he left behind. His fight had inspired others to stand up against oppression, to question the systems that controlled their lives. The toll booth, once a symbol of defiance, became a permanent fixture in the neighborhood, a place where neighbors gathered for coffee, shared stories, and celebrated their newfound freedom. Tom's actions proved that sometimes the smallest act of rebellion can spark a revolution. And as he sat by the toll booth, sipping his coffee and watching the sunset, he realized that living well and doing what's right were the sweetest forms of revenge.